The boy's scream cut through the afternoon air like a razor, and Penelope Dawson dropped the basket of linens she had been carrying, her heart lurching, as she watched the small figure tumble from the hayloft, 20 feet above the ground. She ran before her mind could catch up with her legs, her skirts gathering dust as she sprinted across the yard of the ranch where she had arrived only hours before to work as the new schoolteacher for Sonora's children. The year was 1877, and Penelope had traveled all the way from Boston to this wild California town nestled in the Sierra Nevada foothills, seeking adventure and purpose far from the suffocating expectations of her family's social circle. She had expected many things in this rugged frontier community, but not this. Not a child's body crumpled in the dirt, not the terrible stillness that followed his fall. "Tommy!" The roar came from the barn, and then a man was running too, his boots thundering across the hard-packed earth. Penelope reached the boy first, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his small form as she tried to assess the damage without moving him. The child, no more than 7 years old, lay on his side, his face pale beneath a shock of dark hair, his breathing shallow and rapid. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and his left arm was bent at an unnatural angle that made Penelope's stomach turn. The man skidded to a stop beside her, his face drained of color beneath his sun-bronzed skin. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of storm clouds. His shirt was open at the collar, dusty from work, and his hands shook as he reached for the boy. "Do not move him yet," Penelope said sharply, her voice steadier than she felt. "His arm is broken, and we do not know what other injuries he might have sustained." She had learned basic medical care from her aunt, a nurse who had served during the war, and those lessons came flooding back now with crystalline clarity. "He is my son," the man said, his voice breaking on the last word. "He is all I have. Please, I have to—" "I know," Penelope interrupted gently, her eyes meeting his for the first time. She saw raw fear there, in something else, a desperate loneliness that seemed etched into the lines around his eyes. "But if we move him carelessly, we could make things worse. Let me examine him first." She did not wait for permission, turning her attention back to the boy. "Tommy, can you hear me? My name is Miss Dawson. I am going to help you." The child's eyelids fluttered, and a small whimper escaped his lips. Penelope took that as a good sign. She ran her hands carefully along his limbs, checking for other breaks, for signs of internal bleeding. The boy flinched when she touched his ribs on the left side, and she frowned, pressing gently. Bruised, certainly, possibly cracked. His left arm was definitely broken, the bone displaced enough that she could see the deformity through his thin cotton shirt. "We need to get him inside, onto a bed," she said, looking up at the cowboy. "Can you lift him carefully, support his head and back, keep his left arm as still as possible?" The man nodded, his jaw set in a tight line. "Nathan Ramsey," he said, as if suddenly remembering his manners despite the crisis. "This is my ranch. You were the new teacher from back east." "Penelope Dawson, and yes," she confirmed. "But right now, that does not matter. What matters is getting Tommy inside and setting his arm before the bone shifts further." She helped Nathan slide his hands beneath his son, supporting the boy's head while Nathan took most of the weight. Tommy cried out as they lifted him, and Penelope saw tears streak down Nathan's face, though he made no sound. They carried the boy into the ranch house, a sturdy structure of wood and stone that spoke of care and hard work. The interior was neat but sparse, with the unmistakable mark of a household run by a man alone. There were no curtains on the windows, no flowers on the table, none of the small touches a woman would have added. Nathan laid his son on a bed in a small room off the main living area, and Penelope immediately began issuing instructions. "I need clean water, as hot as you can get it, and clean cloth for bandages. Do you have any whiskey? Not for the boy, but we will need it to clean the wounds. And splints. I need something straight and sturdy, about this long." She held her hands apart to indicate the length. Wooden slats would be ideal. Nathan stared at her for a moment, as if trying to process her rapid-fire commands, then nodded and disappeared. Penelope turned back to Tommy, brushing the hair from his forehead with gentle fingers. "You are going to be all right," she murmured. "You are a brave boy, I can tell. But this is going to hurt. I will not lie to you about that." "Is Papa angry?" Tommy whispered, his eyes opening to reveal the same storm-gray color as his father's. "No, sweetheart. He is not angry. He is frightened because he loves you very much. Penelope began carefully removing Tommy's shirt, trying not to jostle the broken arm. The boy whimpered but did not cry out. "What were you doing in the hayloft?" "Looking for the barn cat's kittens," Tommy said through gritted teeth. "I wanted to see if their eyes were open yet. I leaned too far over the edge. Well, I imagine the kittens are fine, and you will be too, once we get you fixed up." Penelope examined the bruising on his ribs more closely now. Dark purple marks were already forming along his left side, and she probed gently, feeling for any give that might indicate a broken rib puncturing a lung. Tommy hissed in pain, but his breathing remained steady, and she allowed herself a small measure of relief. Nathan returned with a basin of steaming water, several clean towels, a bottle of whiskey, and what looked like slats from a broken crate. "Will these work?" he asked, holding up the wood. "Perfectly." Penelope took them and examined them for splinters, then set them aside. "Now, you need to hold Tommy still while I set his arm. He's going to struggle. It is a natural reaction to pain, but you cannot let him move. Can you do that?" Nathan's face went even paler, but he nodded. "Whatever he needs." "Good." Penelope washed her hands thoroughly in the hot water, then took a clean cloth and soaked it with whiskey. She cleaned the cut on Tommy's forehead first, which proved to be shallow despite the blood. Head wounds always bled more than they should. Then she turned her attention to the arm. "Tommy, I need you to be as still as possible. Your papa is going to hold you, and I am going to fix your arm. It is going to hurt very badly for a moment, but then it will feel much better. Do you understand?" The boy nodded, tears already streaming down his face. Nathan positioned himself at the head of the bed, his hands firm but gentle on Tommy's shoulders. "I have got you, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You squeeze my arm as hard as you need to." Penelope took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and grasped Tommy's arm firmly just above and below the break. With one swift, sure movement, she pulled and rotated, feeling the bone slip back into alignment with a soft click. Tommy screamed, a sound that seemed to tear through the very air, and Nathan made a choking sound that might have been a sob. But Penelope kept her focus, quickly positioning the splints along either side of the arm and wrapping them tightly with strips of cloth torn from one of the towels. "It is done," she said quietly, tying off the bandage. "The worst is over, Tommy. You did so well." The boy had gone limp, unconscious from the pain, and Penelope checked his pulse at his neck, strong and steady. "He has just fainted. It is probably a mercy. His body needs rest now." Nathan collapsed into a chair beside the bed, his face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook, and Penelope realized he was crying. Great silent sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. She stood awkwardly for a moment, unsure whether to comfort him or give him privacy, then made her decision. She placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles, the trembling that ran through his entire frame. "He will be all right," she said softly. "Children heal quickly, and the break was clean. He will need to keep the arm still for 6 weeks or so, which will be the hardest part, I suspect, keeping an active boy quiet. But he will recover fully." Nathan looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. "Thank you," he whispered. "I do not know what I would have done if you had not been here. I would have panicked, probably made everything worse. You saved him." "I helped him," Penelope corrected gently. "And you would have found a way. Parents always do." She moved to the basin and wrung out a clean cloth, bringing it back to wipe the sweat and grime from Tommy's face. The boy's color was already better, his breathing deep and even in sleep. He should rest now. The pain will be considerable when he wakes, but I can make a willow bark tea that will help. Do you have any willow trees on your property?" "Down by the creek," Nathan said, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I will show you." He started to stand, then swayed slightly, and Penelope caught his arm. "Perhaps you should sit for a moment longer," she suggested. "You have had quite a shock yourself." "I am fine," Nathan said automatically, but he did not pull away from her touch. When I saw him fall, I thought—" He could not finish the sentence, but he did not need to. Penelope understood. "Where is Tommy's mother?" she asked gently, though she suspected she already knew the answer from the state of the house and the naked grief in Nathan's eyes. "Dead," Nathan said flatly. 2 years ago. Fever took her, and there was nothing anyone could do. I thought I had known loss before, but losing Sarah, it broke something in me. Tommy is all I have left of her, all I have left of anything good in this world." He looked down at his sleeping son, and his expression softened. "He looks like her, you know, has her eyes, her smile. Sometimes it hurts to look at him because I miss her so much. But most of the time, it is the only thing that keeps me going." Penelope felt a lump form in her throat. She had known loneliness herself, the particular isolation of being different, of wanting more than what society deemed appropriate for a woman. But she had never known the kind of loss Nathan described, the death of a spouse, the weight of raising a child alone in this harsh land. "He is lucky to have you as a father," she said. "I can see how much you love him." "Love is not always enough," Nathan said bitterly. "I could not keep him safe. I should have been watching him more closely. I was working on the fence line behind the barn, and I just assumed he was playing in the yard. I did not know he had gone up into the loft." "Children are quick and curious," Penelope said firmly. "You cannot watch him every moment of every day. Accidents happen. What matters is that he is going to be fine, and he has a father who cares enough to fall apart at the thought of losing him. Trust me, that is more than many children have." Nathan studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "You are not what I expected," he said finally. "When they told me a teacher was coming from Boston, I pictured someone prim and proper, someone who would look down her nose at the way we live out here. But you are different. You knew exactly what to do. You did not hesitate." "My aunt was a nurse," Penelope explained. "She taught me a great deal about treating injuries and illness. As for being prim and proper, well, I suppose I am in some ways. But I also believe in being useful, and standing around wringing my hands while a child suffers struck me as rather pointless." She smiled slightly. "Besides, I chose to come out here precisely because I was tired of the expectations back east. I wanted to do something meaningful with my life." "Teaching is certainly meaningful," Nathan said. "Lord knows these children need a proper education. Most of them can barely read and write. The last teacher we had lasted 3 months before, she decided frontier life was too rough and went back to San Francisco." "I do not plan on going anywhere," Penelope said. "I came here to build a life, not to sample adventure and then retreat to comfort." She glanced down at Tommy, who was stirring slightly, his eyelashes fluttering. "I think he is waking up. I should get that willow bark tea started. The sooner we can ease his pain, the better." Nathan stood, steadier now, and led her out to the main room of the house. The kitchen area was functional, but showed signs of neglect, dishes piled in the basin, dust on the shelves. "I am afraid I am not much of a housekeeper," Nathan said, following her gaze. "I keep things clean enough, but the niceties, well, I never seem to find the time." "You are raising a son and running a ranch alone," Penelope pointed out. "I think you can be forgiven for not maintaining a spotless home." She found a pot and filled it with water from a bucket on the counter. "If you show me where the willow trees are, I can gather the bark myself. You should stay with Tommy in case he wakes and is frightened." "The creek is just through those trees, about 100 yards due south," Nathan said, pointing through the window. "Follow the path, you cannot miss it. But are you sure you will be all right alone? There are sometimes rattlesnakes down there this time of year." "I will be careful," Penelope assured him. "And I am not afraid of snakes, though I will certainly give them a wide berth if I encounter any." She took a knife from the block on the counter and headed for the door. "I will be back shortly." The afternoon sun was still high in the sky as Penelope made her way down the worn path toward the sound of running water. The landscape around Nathan's ranch was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, rolling hills covered in dry grass and scattered oaks, mountains rising in the distance with their peaks still touched by snow, despite the warmth of late spring. She could hear cattle lowing somewhere to the west, and the harsh cry of a hawk circling overhead. This was a hard land, she thought, a place that demanded strength and resilience from those who chose to make their lives here. She understood why Nathan's wife's death had hit him so hard. Out here, people depended on each other in ways that city dwellers never had to consider. The loss of a partner was not just an emotional devastation, but a practical one as well. She found the creek easily, a narrow ribbon of water that chattered over smooth stones, bordered by thick stands of willow. Penelope knelt beside one of the trees and carefully cut several strips of bark from the trunk, taking care not to damage the tree too severely. Her aunt had taught her that willow bark tea was one of the most effective remedies for pain and fever, better than many of the expensive medicines sold in apothecaries. She gathered enough to last several days, tucked it into her apron pocket, and stood to head back to the house. That was when she heard the voices. They were coming from somewhere upstream, male voices raised in argument. Penelope froze, uncertain whether she should make her presence known or slip quietly back to the house. She was new here, unfamiliar with the local dynamics, and the last thing she wanted was to stumble into some dispute that was none of her business. But as the voices grew louder, she caught words that made her blood run cold. "Ramsey owes us, and he is going to pay one way or another. Maybe we should teach him a lesson, burn his barn or run off some of his cattle. Let him know what happens when you cross the Dougherty brothers." Penelope's heart began to pound. She had heard that name before, on the stagecoach ride from Sacramento. The Dougherty brothers were known throughout the region as troublemakers, men who walked the line between honest ranching and outright criminality. They had been accused more than once of cattle rustling, of claim jumping, of intimidation and violence. No one seemed willing or able to stop them, partly because they had friends in the territorial government, and partly because people were simply afraid. She needed to get back to the house, to warn Nathan, but as she turned to go, her boot caught on a root and she stumbled, sending a shower of pebbles into the creek with a splash that seemed impossibly loud in the afternoon quiet. The voices stopped abruptly, and then she heard the sound of boots on stone coming closer. "Who is there? Show yourself!" Penelope straightened her spine, smoothed her skirts, and stepped out from behind the willow trees with as much dignity as she could muster. 3 men stood on the bank upstream, all of them looking rough and trail-worn. The one in the middle was tall and heavy-set, with a beard that obscured most of his face. The other 2 were leaner, harder, with the look of men who had spent more time breaking the law than following it. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," Penelope said, her voice cool and level despite the fear hammering in her chest. "I apologize for startling you. I was gathering willow bark and did not realize anyone else was about." The bearded man's eyes narrowed. "You are on Ramsey land. Who are you?" "Miss Penelope Dawson, the new schoolteacher for Sonora," she replied. "I am staying at Mr. Ramsey's ranch temporarily while I arrange my own accommodations in town. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a patient waiting for me." She turned to go, but the lean man on the right moved quickly, blocking her path. "Not so fast, teacher lady. Maybe you can take a message to Ramsey for us. Save us the trouble of riding up to the house." "I am not a messenger service," Penelope said sharply. "If you have business with Mr. Ramsey, I suggest you call on him properly during daylight hours, from the front of his property like civilized men." The bearded man laughed, a sound like gravel in a bucket. "Civilized, she says. Did you hear that, boys? The lady wants us to be civilized." His expression hardened. "You tell Ramsey that the Dougherty brothers do not forget debts. He knows what he owes us, and we aim to collect, one way or another. You make sure he gets that message, teacher lady. Or next time, we might not be so friendly." Penelope felt anger burn through her fear. "I will do no such thing. If you have a legitimate grievance with Mr. Ramsey, take it up with the sheriff. Otherwise, I suggest you leave this property before Mr. Ramsey finds you here and takes exception to your presence." She pushed past the lean man, half expecting one of them to grab her, but they let her go, laughing as she walked away with as much dignity as she could manage. Her hands were shaking by the time she reached the house, and she had to pause at the door to collect herself before going inside. Nathan was sitting beside Tommy's bed, holding his son's hand, and he looked up when she entered. "Did you find the willow trees all right?" he asked, then frowned. "What is wrong? You look pale." "I encountered some men down by the creek," Penelope said, setting the bark on the table and beginning to prepare the tea with hands that only trembled slightly. "They called themselves the Dougherty brothers. They said you owe them something, and they were discussing ways to teach you a lesson." Nathan's jaw tightened, and she saw his free hand curl into a fist. "Those vultures! I knew they would not let it rest." "What do you owe them?" Penelope asked, then held up a hand. "I apologize. That is none of my business." "No, you have a right to know, especially if they threatened you." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly exhausted. 6 months ago, during the drought, I was desperate for water. My creek was running dry, and I was about to lose my herd. The Doughertys offered to let me run a channel from their property to mine, said it would cost me $50. I paid them, and they dug the channel. But then the rains came early, and I did not end up needing their water after all. Now they are claiming I owe them another $50 for lost opportunity, saying they could have sold that water to someone else if I had not bought it. It is extortion, plain and simple, but the sheriff is the Dougherty's cousin, so there is no point in taking it to the law. That is outrageous, Penelope said, pouring boiling water over the willow bark and letting it steep. Surely there must be someone who can help, someone in the territorial government. The territorial government is 300 miles away and has bigger problems than a land dispute between ranchers, Nathan said bitterly. Out here, you deal with your problems yourself, or you get run off your land. I have been trying to scrape together the money, but between the drought last year and the costs of running the ranch, I barely have enough to feed us and keep the place going. I told the Doughertys I would pay them when I sold my cattle in the fall, but apparently that is not good enough. Penelope brought the tea to Tommy's bedside and helped the drowsy boy sit up enough to drink. The child made a face at the bitter taste, but swallowed obediently, and Penelope praised him for his bravery. Within minutes, she could see the tension easing from his small body as the pain receded. She settled him back against the pillows and turned to Nathan. "There has to be something we can do," she said. "I will not stand by and watch bullies terrorize decent people." "We?" Nathan repeated, one eyebrow raised. "Miss Dawson, I appreciate your concern, but this is my problem, not yours. You should not get involved. The Doughertys are dangerous men." "They threatened me today, which makes it my problem too," Penelope countered, "and I do not take kindly to threats. Besides, I am not some helpless damsel in distress. I can take care of myself." Nathan studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression, a combination of respect and something else, something warmer that made Penelope's heart skip in an entirely unexpected way. "I can see that," he said quietly, "but I would never forgive myself if you came to harm because of my troubles." "Then we will simply have to make sure that does not happen," Penelope said briskly, ignoring the flutter in her chest. "Now, I need to stay here tonight to monitor Tommy's condition. Head injuries can be unpredictable, and I want to wake him every few hours to make sure he remains coherent. I assume you have a spare room where I can sleep?" Yes, of course," Nathan stammered, clearly caught off guard by her presumption. "But surely it would not be proper, you staying here alone with me? People will talk." "Let them," Penelope said. "A child's welfare is more important than gossip. Besides, I am not some blushing young girl worried about her reputation. I am a professional woman with medical training, and Tommy needs supervision. That is all anyone needs to know." She fixed Nathan with a look that brooked no argument. "Now, do you have anything in the house for dinner? Or shall I see what I can put together from what I saw in your pantry?" Despite everything, Nathan smiled, and Penelope was struck by how it transformed his face, erasing the lines of grief and worry and revealing the handsome man beneath. "I think there are some eggs and bacon, and probably some bread that is not too stale. I am afraid my cooking skills are limited to keeping us from starving." "Then it is fortunate that I am an excellent cook," Penelope said. "My mother insisted on all her daughters learning, despite our having servants. She said a woman should always be able to care for her family, regardless of circumstance. I used to resent those lessons, but I find I am grateful for them now." She moved to the kitchen area and began assembling a meal, and Nathan followed after a few minutes, leaving Tommy sleeping peacefully. He watched her work with an expression that was part curiosity, part wonder, as if he could not quite believe she was real. "Why did you really come out here?" he asked finally. "A woman like you, educated, refined, you could have had your pick of positions back east. Why choose a rough mining town in California?" Penelope cracked eggs into a pan, considering her answer. "Because back east, my life was mapped out for me before I was born. I was supposed to marry a man of good family, run his household, produce his children, and never have a thought that was not approved by society. I was supposed to be decorative and pleasant and empty-headed. But I am not any of those things, Mr. Ramsey. I have opinions and ambitions and a desperate need to be useful in the world. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Sonora, it felt like a lifeline, a chance to be something more than what everyone expected." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "Does that make sense to you?" "More than you might think," Nathan said softly. "I came out here for similar reasons. Actually, I was supposed to take over my father's banking business in St. Louis, wear a suit every day, count other people's money, and pretend I was happy. But I wanted land of my own, wanted to build something with my own hands. Sarah understood that. She was willing to leave everything behind and come west with me, even though her family disowned her for marrying beneath her station. His voice caught. I hope I gave her some happiness before she died. I hope she did not regret choosing me. I am certain she did not, Penelope said gently. Not if she loved you, and I can see from the way you speak of her that you loved her deeply. That kind of love is worth any sacrifice. She served the eggs and bacon onto 2 plates and cut thick slices of bread. Come, let us eat before the food gets cold. You need to keep your strength up if you are going to deal with the Dochertys and care for Tommy. They ate at the rough wooden table in companionable silence, and Penelope found herself studying Nathan when she thought he was not looking. He was a good man, she could tell, the kind of man who worked hard and loved fiercely and tried to do right by those in his care, the kind of man who was rare in any time or place. She found herself wondering what it would be like to be loved by such a man, then immediately chided herself for the thought. She had known him for mere hours, and he was clearly still grieving his wife. Such thoughts were inappropriate and premature, but she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, the desire to ease his burdens, to see him smile again without the shadow of sadness in his eyes. She told herself it was simple compassion, the same impulse that had driven her to help Tommy, but deep down, she knew it was something more, something that both thrilled and terrified her. After dinner, Penelope checked on Tommy again and found him sleeping peacefully, his color good, his breathing steady. She mixed another batch of willow bark tea for when he woke in pain during the night, then accepted Nathan's offer of the spare room. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a washstand, and she was grateful for the privacy to change into her nightgown and let down her hair. She woke Tommy every 2 hours throughout the night, as she had planned, asking him simple questions to ensure his mind was clear. Each time, Nathan was there too, hovering anxiously until she reassured him that his son was fine. In the gray hours before dawn, after she had settled Tommy back to sleep for the 4th time, Nathan caught her arm as she turned to go back to her room. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. "I do not know how to repay you for what you have done, for what you are doing." "You do not need to repay me," Penelope said. "This is what people do for each other, is it not? We help when we are able." But even as she said the words, she was acutely aware of his hand on her arm, the warmth of his touch through the thin fabric of her nightgown sleeve, the way he was looking at her in the dim lamplight. "Not everyone," Nathan said. "Not in my experience. Most people are too wrapped up in their own concerns to care about anyone else's troubles." He released her arm, but did not step back. "You are different, Penelope. May I call you Penelope?" "Yes," she whispered, her throat suddenly dry. "And I will call you Nathan, if that is acceptable." "More than acceptable." He smiled that transformative smile again, and Penelope felt something shift inside her chest, something that felt like the beginning of a landslide, unstoppable once it started. "Get some rest. I will sit with Tommy for a while." Penelope returned to her room, but found sleep elusive. She lay in the narrow bed, watching the sky lighten through the window, thinking about Nathan and Tommy, about the life they were building here, in this harsh but beautiful land, about the threats hanging over them from the Docherty brothers. She had meant what she said about helping, but she had no idea how to stand against men like that, men who were willing to use violence and intimidation to get what they wanted. What could a schoolteacher from Boston possibly do against such opponents? The answer came to her as the sun broke over the horizon, flooding the room with golden light. She could not fight the Dochertys with force, but she could fight them with information, with organization, with the power of a community standing together. If the sheriff would not help because of family ties, then perhaps the people of Sonora would, if they understood what was at stake. Men like the Dochertys thrived on isolation, on dividing their victims and picking them off one by one. But if the ranchers and townspeople banded together, that was a different story entirely. She rose, dressed quickly, and found Nathan already in the kitchen, making coffee. "How is Tommy?" she asked. "Still sleeping soundly. His fever is normal, and he even smiled in his sleep a moment ago." Nathan poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her. "You should have slept longer. You were up half the night." "I have been thinking," Penelope said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "About the Dochertys and your situation. I have an idea, but I need you to trust me and to introduce me to your neighbors. Nathan raised an eyebrow. What kind of idea? The kind that involves the entire community standing up to bullies instead of letting them terrorize people one at a time, Penelope said. The Doughertys are counting on people being too afraid or too isolated to fight back. But what if they are wrong? What if every rancher and business owner in the area decided they had had enough? That is a nice thought, Nathan said carefully. But organizing something like that, getting people to stand together, it is not as easy as you might think. Everyone has their own problems, their own fears, and the Doughertys have a long reach. They could make life very difficult for anyone who crosses them. They are already making life difficult, Penelope pointed out. The question is whether people are willing to keep suffering in isolation or whether they are ready to fight back as a group. I have some experience with organizing, Mr. Ramsey. Nathan, back in Boston, I was involved in several charitable organizations and reform movements. I know how to bring people together around a common cause. Nathan studied her for a long moment, then shook his head with a rueful smile. You are quite remarkable. Do you know that? Most women in your position would be looking for the first stage out of here. Instead, you are planning a campaign against the most dangerous men in the territory. Most women in my position would not be in this position, Penelope replied tartly. I did not come out here to hide from difficulty. Now, will you help me or not? Of course I will help you, Nathan said, though I reserve the right to think you are completely mad. His expression sobered. But Penelope, you need to understand what you are getting into. The Doughertys do not make idle threats. If they decide you are a problem, they will not hesitate to hurt you. Then we will simply have to make sure they do not get the chance, Penelope said, with more confidence than she felt. Now, I need to go into town today to finalize my teaching arrangements and find permanent lodging. While I'm there, I can start talking to people, getting a sense of who might be willing to stand with us. Can you spare the time to take me in your wagon? I want to check on Tommy one more time before we go, but if he is stable, I think we can leave him with a neighbor for a few hours. Mrs. Chen from the ranch to the east owes me a favor, Nathan said. She would be happy to sit with Tommy, I am sure, and yes, I will take you into town. I need to pick up supplies anyway. He hesitated. Penelope, are you sure about this? Once we start down this road, there is no turning back. I am sure, Penelope said firmly, though her heart was racing. Sometimes you have to stand up for what is right, regardless of the consequences. My father used to say that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I refuse to be someone who does nothing. Tommy was indeed doing well when they checked on him, complaining mostly about being bored and confined to bed. Penelope took that as an excellent sign and gave him strict instructions to rest and obey Mrs. Chen. The older Chinese woman arrived within the hour, clucking over Tommy like a mother hen and shooing Nathan and Penelope out the door with instructions to take their time. The ride into Sonora took nearly an hour, the wagon bouncing over rutted roads that wound through the foothills. Nathan handled the team with practiced ease, and Penelope found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled at something she said. They talked easily, sharing stories of their lives before they came west, and Penelope was surprised by how comfortable she felt with him, as if they had known each other for years rather than a single day. Sonora itself was a bustling town built on the wealth of gold mining, though the initial rush had faded and the community was settling into a more stable existence. The main street was lined with wooden buildings, some painted, some weathered gray, housing everything from a general store to a saloon to a surprisingly elegant hotel. Nathan guided the wagon to a stop in front of a tidy building with a sign reading Sonora School District and helped Penelope down, his hand steady on her waist. The school board meets here, he explained. Mr. Henderson, the chairman, should be inside. Do you want me to come with you? No, I can manage this part on my own, Penelope said. Why do not you see to your errands and we can meet back here in an hour? Are you certain? I do not mind waiting. I am certain. Go. She gave him a gentle push, and he went, though he looked back over his shoulder twice before disappearing into the general store. The meeting with Mr. Henderson went smoothly. He was a portly, balding man, with a kind face and a genuine enthusiasm for education. He showed her the schoolhouse, a single room with benches and a wood stove, and explained that she would be teaching children ranging from age 5 to 14, as many as 20 students on a good day. The pay was modest but fair, and he had already arranged for her to take a room at the boarding house run by Mrs. Sullivan on the edge of town. "We are very pleased to have you, Miss Dawson," Mr. Henderson said, shaking her hand vigorously. "Your credentials are impressive, and we have been without a proper teacher for far too long. The children are running wild, I'm afraid, but I have no doubt you will whip them into shape." "I prefer to inspire rather than whip," Penelope said with a smile, "but I appreciate your confidence. I was wondering, Mr. Henderson, if I might ask you about something unrelated to the school. Do you know anything about the Doherty brothers?" Mr. Henderson's expression closed down instantly, his affable smile fading. "Why do you ask about them?" "Because they have been making threats against Mr. Ramsey, the rancher who brought me into town today. Apparently there is some dispute over money owed, though from what I understand, the debt is questionable at best. I am concerned about the situation." "As well you should be," Mr. Henderson said heavily. "The Dohertys are a blight on this community, Miss Dawson, but there is not much anyone can do about them. They have connections, money, and they are not afraid to use violence to get what they want. My advice to Mr. Ramsey would be to pay them what they ask and avoid further trouble. Even though what they are asking is fundamentally unjust. Justice is a luxury out here," Mr. Henderson said. "Survival is what matters. I am sorry, Miss Dawson, but that is the reality of life on the frontier. Now, if you will excuse me, I have another appointment to keep. Classes start Monday morning at 8 o'clock sharp. I look forward to seeing you then." He ushered her out with the practiced efficiency of a man who did not want to continue a difficult conversation, and Penelope found herself standing on the wooden sidewalk, frustrated but not defeated. If Mr. Henderson would not help, she would find someone who would. She spent the next hour walking through town, stopping in various businesses and introducing herself as the new teacher. Most people were friendly, if somewhat reserved, and she made a point of mentioning Nathan's situation when it seemed appropriate. The reactions varied from sympathy to fear to a carefully neutral, "That is none of my business." But she also heard whispers of others who had been victimized by the Dohertys, a rancher who had lost cattle, a merchant who had been forced to pay protection money, a woman whose husband had been beaten for refusing to sell his land. By the time she met Nathan back at the wagon, she had the beginnings of a plan and a list of names of people who might be willing to help if approached correctly. Nathan took one look at her face and smiled. "You have been stirring up trouble, have not you?" "I prefer to think of it as gathering information," Penelope said primly, but she could not suppress her own smile. "And yes, perhaps stirring up a little trouble. Did you complete your errands?" "I did. And I may have mentioned to a few people that the new schoolteacher is not afraid of the Dohertys and is planning to do something about them. You are already becoming famous, or perhaps infamous would be a better word." "Infamous is fine with me," Penelope said, "as long as people are talking and thinking about the problem instead of just accepting it. Now, we should get back to Tommy. I want to check on his injuries and make sure he is not developing any complications." The ride back to the ranch was quieter than the morning journey, both of them lost in their own thoughts. But when Nathan helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingered on her waist a moment longer than necessary, and when their eyes met, Penelope saw something there that made her breath catch. It was too soon, she told herself. They barely knew each other. He was still grieving his wife, but the connection between them was undeniable, a pull as strong as gravity, as inevitable as the sunrise. "Penelope," Nathan said softly, and then seemed to lose his nerve. "Thank you. For everything." "You do not need to keep thanking me," she said, but she did not step away from him. "I am doing what needs to be done, that is all." "No, it is more than that. You are doing what no one else has been willing to do. You are standing up when everyone else would rather look away. That takes courage, real courage, and I want you to know I see it." His hands dropped from her waist, and he stepped back, breaking the spell. "Come on, let us go check on my boy." Tommy was in good spirits when they returned, regaling Mrs. Chen with an exaggerated version of his fall that made it sound far more dramatic than it had been. The older woman laughed and ruffled his hair affectionately before taking her leave. Penelope examined Tommy's injuries carefully and was pleased to find everything healing as it should. The bruising on his ribs was spectacular, purple and yellow and green, but there was no sign of internal bleeding. His arm was immobilized properly, and while she knew the next few weeks would be difficult for an active boy, she was confident he would make a full recovery. Over the following days, Penelope settled into a routine. She moved her belongings to Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house, but spent most of her time at Nathan's ranch, ostensibly to monitor Tommy's recovery, but increasingly because she simply wanted to be there. She cooked meals, cleaned the neglected house, and in the evenings, after Tommy was asleep, she and Nathan would sit on the porch and talk for hours about everything and nothing. She learned that Nathan had been a reader as a boy, that he had a weakness for poetry, though he would never admit it to anyone but her, that he played the guitar but had not touched the instrument since Sarah died. He learned that Penelope had always been rebellious, that she had been expelled from finishing school for organizing a protest about the inadequate curriculum, that she dreamed of one day writing a book about her experiences in the West. They were falling in love, though neither spoke the words aloud. It was there in the way Nathan's eyes followed her around the room, in the way Penelope found excuses to touch his hand or shoulder, in the comfortable silences that stretched between them. But Nathan still wore his wedding ring, still sometimes got a distant look in his eyes as if remembering another life, and Penelope did not push. She knew he needed time, needed to grieve fully before he could open his heart to someone new. Meanwhile, she continued her organizing efforts. She called a meeting at the schoolhouse, ostensibly to discuss the upcoming school term, but really to gauge interest in collective action against the Doughertys. 12 people showed up, more than she had dared hope, and after the official business was concluded, she brought up the real issue. "I know many of you have been victimized by the Dougherty brothers," she said, standing at the front of the room with her hands clasped to hide their trembling. "I know you have paid them money you did not owe, given them livestock and land and goods to avoid their violence. I know you have lived in fear of crossing them because you believed you had no choice, but I am here to tell you that there is another way. If we stand together, if we refuse to be intimidated as a community, they cannot touch us. There are more of us than there are of them, and we have the law on our side, even if the local sheriff refuses to enforce it." "Easy for you to say," someone called from the back. "You have not been here long enough to understand how things work. The Doughertys always get what they want. They get what they want because we let them," Penelope countered. "Because we are divided, because we let fear control us. But what if we document every crime they have committed, every illegal act, and send that documentation to the territorial governor? What if we hire our own security, men who can protect our properties and families? What if we simply refuse to pay them another cent and dare them to take us all on at once?" There was murmuring in the crowd, some of it interested, some of it skeptical. A lean man with graying hair stood up. "I am Frank Morrison. The Doughertys took 20 head of my cattle last year and threatened to burn my house if I reported it. I am willing to stand with you, Miss Dawson, but only if others will too. I cannot fight them alone." "You will not have to," Penelope promised. "That is the entire point. We fight together or not at all." One by one, others stood. A merchant whose store had been vandalized, a widow whose husband had died in a suspicious accident after refusing to sell his land to the Doughertys, a young rancher who had been beaten for courting a girl the eldest Dougherty brother wanted for himself. By the end of the evening, Penelope had commitments from 9 families to stand together, to document the crimes, to pool their resources for protection. It was a start. Nathan was waiting for her when she emerged from the schoolhouse, leaning against his wagon with his arms crossed. "You did it," he said, sounding half amazed, half terrified. "You actually got people to agree to stand up to them." "We are not done yet," Penelope cautioned. "This is just the beginning. But yes, we have a chance now, a real chance." "The Doughertys are going to hear about this meeting," Nathan warned. "And when they do, they are going to be angry. You need to be careful, Penelope. I need you to be careful." The way he said it, the raw emotion in his voice, made Penelope's heart skip. "I will be," she promised. "And you need to be careful too. You are the one they have been targeting all along." "I am less worried about me than I am about you and Tommy," Nathan said. He pushed off from the wagon and moved closer to her, his expression intense in the lamplight spilling from the schoolhouse windows. "Penelope, I need to tell you something, and I do not know if it is the right time, or even if I should say it at all, but I cannot keep it inside anymore." "What is it?" she asked, though her heart was already racing because she thought she knew what he was going to say. "I care about you," Nathan said. "More than I have cared about anyone since Sarah died. When you are around, the house feels alive again. Tommy adores you, and I find myself thinking about you constantly. wanting to tell you things, share things with you. I know it has only been a few weeks. I know I'm probably being foolish, but I needed you to know." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "Nathan, I care about you too. So much it frightens me sometimes, but I do not want you to feel pressured or to think you have to say these things because I have been helping with Tommy. You are still grieving Sarah, and that is understandable and right." "I will always grieve Sarah," Nathan said. "She was my first love, the mother of my son, and I will carry her memory with me until I die. But she has been gone for 2 years, and I think if she could see me now, she would want me to be happy again. She would want Tommy to have a mother, someone who could love him the way you already do." He reached out and gently cupped Penelope's face. "I am not asking you to replace her. I am asking if you might be willing to build something new with me, something that honors what I had before, while also looking forward to what we could have together." "Yes," Penelope whispered. "Yes, Nathan, I would like that very much." He kissed her then, gently at first, and then with growing passion, and Penelope felt the world fall away until there was nothing but this man, this moment, this perfect connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have much to offer you," he said. "A struggling ranch, a 7-year-old boy, and more trouble than any sane woman would want to take on." "You have yourself," Penelope said, "and that is more than enough for me. Besides, I am not a sane woman. I am a stubborn, rebellious, impossible woman who fell in love with a cowboy and his beautiful boy. I think we are going to be very happy together, assuming the Doughertys do not kill us all first." Nathan laughed, the sound surprised and genuine and full of joy. "Well, when you put it that way. Come on, let us get you back to the boarding house before Mrs. Sullivan sends out a search party." But before he could hand her up into the wagon, there was a shout from down the street, and then the sound of breaking glass. Penelope and Nathan ran toward the noise and found Frank Morrison standing in front of his shop, staring at the rock that had been thrown through his window. A piece of paper was tied to it with twine, and when Morrison unfolded it with shaking hands, the message was clear and chilling. "Back off or pay the price." "They already know," Morrison said, his face pale. "How did they find out so fast?" "Someone at the meeting must have told them," Nathan said grimly. "Or they have a spy in town watching for any sign of resistance." "I am sorry, Miss Dawson," Morrison said. "I want to help, truly I do. But I cannot risk my family. The Doughertys have made their point." He crumpled the note and threw it down. "I am out." "Mr. Morrison, please," Penelope started, but the man was already walking away, his shoulders hunched in defeat. She turned to Nathan, feeling the weight of failure settling on her shoulders. "This is my fault. I moved too quickly, was not careful enough." "This is not your fault," Nathan said firmly. "This is on the Doughertys and whoever told them about the meeting. But, Penelope, Morrison is right about one thing. This is dangerous now. The Doughertys have shown their hand, and they are not going to back down. We need to be smarter, more careful. Or we need to go on the offensive," Penelope said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. "They are expecting us to be afraid, to back down at the first sign of trouble. What if we do the opposite? What if we make it clear that intimidation will not work?" "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked warily. "I am thinking that I need to have a conversation with the Dougherty brothers myself," Penelope said, "face to face in public where they cannot threaten me without witnesses. I want them to understand that we are not going away, that their tactics will not work this time." "Absolutely not," Nathan said immediately. "That is far too dangerous. I will not let you put yourself at risk like that." "You will not let me?" Penelope repeated, her eyes flashing. "Nathan Ramsey, I am not your property to permit or forbid. I am a grown woman making my own choices, and my choice is to confront these men and make it clear that their reign of terror is over." "Then I am coming with you," Nathan said, "because I am a grown man making my own choice, and my choice is to stand beside the woman I love and make sure nothing happens to her. The woman I love." The words hung in the air between them, and despite the tension and fear, Penelope felt a rush of warmth. "All right," she said, "we will do this together. Tomorrow afternoon, in the middle of town where everyone can see. We will make this a public confrontation, and we will not back down." "You are completely insane," Nathan said, but there was admiration in his voice. And I am completely in love with you, God help me." "God help us both," Penelope agreed. They sent word through Morrison, despite his defection, asking him to pass along a message that Miss Dawson wanted to meet with the Doherty brothers at 2 o'clock the following afternoon in front of the hotel. To Penelope's surprise, the Dohertys agreed, apparently amused by the idea of a schoolteacher thinking she could stand against them. Penelope spent the morning preparing her arguments, rehearsing what she would say, while Nathan paced the floor of his ranch house like a caged animal. Tommy, who was healing remarkably well, watched them both with wide eyes. "Are you really going to fight the bad men, Miss Penelope?" he asked. "Not fight exactly," Penelope said, kneeling beside his bed. "I am going to talk to them and try to make them understand that they need to leave good people alone. Sometimes words can be more powerful than fists, Tommy. Remember that." "My papa says you are the bravest person he has ever met," Tommy said. "And he is right. When I grow up, I want to marry someone just like you." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "That is very sweet, Tommy. And I hope you do find someone wonderful to share your life with. But right now, you focus on getting better, all right? Your papa and I will handle the bad men." When they arrived in town at 1:30, a crowd had already gathered. Word of the confrontation had spread quickly, and it seemed like half of Sonora had turned out to watch. Penelope's hands were trembling, but she kept them clasped in front of her and her spine straight as she and Nathan took up position in front of the hotel. The Dohertys arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, riding in on expensive horses, 3 large men who radiated menace. The bearded one she had met by the creek dismounted and swaggered over, his brothers flanking him. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying across the silent street. "The little schoolteacher wants to have a chat. This should be entertaining. I am Cyrus Doherty, in case you were wondering. These are my brothers, Silas and Jeb. Now, what is this all about, teacher lady?" "My name is Miss Penelope Dawson," Penelope said, her voice steady and clear. "And I am here to inform you that your campaign of intimidation and extortion in this community is over. The people of Sonora will no longer pay your illegal demands or submit to your threats. We have documented your crimes, and that documentation will be sent to the territorial governor. We have also banded together for mutual protection. Any attack on one of us will be considered an attack on all of us, and we will respond accordingly." Cyrus Doherty threw back his head and laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the buildings. "Did you hear that? Boys? The teacher lady thinks she can stop us. That is the funniest thing I have heard in months." His expression hardened. "Let me explain something to you, Miss Dawson. This territory belongs to the Dohertys. We were here when it was nothing but wilderness, and we built our empire with blood and sweat. These people," he gestured dismissively at the crowd, "they are here because we allow them to be here. They pay us because that is the price of doing business on our land, and if they do not like it, they can leave." "This is not your land," Penelope said. "These people have legal claims, legal rights. You are nothing but common criminals hiding behind intimidation because you lack the skill or intelligence to succeed honestly." Cyrus's face went purple with rage. "Why, you little—" He started toward her, but Nathan stepped in front of Penelope, his hand dropping to the gun at his hip. "That is far enough," Nathan said quietly. "You will not touch her. Or what, Ramsey? You will shoot me in front of all these witnesses? I do not think so." But Cyrus stopped advancing, his eyes calculating. "You are making a mistake, both of you, a big mistake. The only mistake here is thinking you can continue to terrorize decent people without consequences," Penelope said, stepping out from behind Nathan. "I am giving you a choice, Mr. Doherty. You can leave this community alone, cease your illegal activities, and perhaps the territorial authorities will be lenient when they investigate. Or you can continue on your current path, and I promise you, we will not rest until you are brought to justice." "Justice!" Cyrus spat the word. "There is no justice out here, girl, just power, and we have more of it than you could ever imagine." He turned to address the crowd. "Listen up, all of you. Anyone who stands with this fool woman will regret it. Anyone who refuses to pay what they owe will find their property burned, their livestock dead, their families in danger. This is your only warning." But something was shifting in the crowd. Penelope could feel it, a change in the atmosphere, a stiffening of spines. Frank Morrison stepped forward, his face set. "I am standing with Miss Dawson," he said. "I am tired of being afraid." A woman followed. "Me too." "And me." "And us." Within moments, more than 20 people had moved to stand beside Penelope and Nathan, forming a human wall against the Doughertys. Cyrus looked around, his expression darkening, and Penelope saw something like fear flicker in his eyes before it was replaced by cold fury. "You will all pay for this," he said, "every last one of you." He mounted his horse and wheeled it around, his brothers following. But before they rode off, he looked back at Penelope. "Especially you, teacher lady. You have just made yourself a target, and we never miss." They thundered out of town, leaving dust and stunned silence in their wake. And then someone started clapping, and another person joined in, and suddenly the entire street erupted in applause. People crowded around Penelope and Nathan, shaking their hands, thanking them, vowing to stand together. Penelope felt overwhelmed by it all, by the weight of what they had started, by the knowledge that the Doughertys would not take this defeat lightly. But when she looked at Nathan and saw the pride and love in his eyes, she knew it had been worth it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next weeks were tense. The Doughertys made several attempts at intimidation, burning an empty barn on Morrison's property, running off a few head of cattle from another rancher's land. But each time, the community responded as one, rebuilding what was destroyed, replacing what was stolen, refusing to be broken. Penelope organized patrols to watch over vulnerable properties at night. Nathan worked with other ranchers to create a rapid response system so that help could arrive quickly when needed. And slowly, the tide began to turn. The documentation they had compiled, carefully listing every crime, every victim, every illegal act, was sent to the territorial governor with signatures from 40 residents of Sonora. An investigator arrived from Sacramento, a stern man named William Garrett, who listened to testimonies and examined evidence with meticulous care. Meanwhile, Penelope had started teaching, and the schoolhouse was full every day with children eager to learn. Tommy, his arm still splinted but healing well, sat in the front row and was one of her best students. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic, but also history and science and critical thinking. She taught her students that they had rights, that they could stand up for themselves, that knowledge was power. And every evening she went home to Nathan's ranch because sometime during those chaotic weeks it had become home, the place where her heart lived. She and Nathan had not yet married, wanting to wait until the situation with the Doughertys was resolved, but everyone in town knew they were courting and approved wholeheartedly. Even Mrs. Sullivan, who ran the boarding house where Penelope still officially kept a room, winked and told her not to worry about the proprieties. The break came in late August. The investigator, Garrett, arrested the sheriff for corruption and brought in federal marshals to apprehend the Dougherty brothers. There was a brief, violent confrontation at the Dougherty ranch that left Silas wounded and Jeb dead, while Cyrus was taken into custody. The trial was swift and decisive. Cyrus Dougherty was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison for extortion, assault, and cattle rustling. Silas, the younger brother, received 10 years. It was over. The night after the verdict was announced, Nathan took Penelope out to the ridge overlooking his ranch, where the stars hung so low and bright it seemed you could reach up and touch them. He had brought a blanket and a basket with cold chicken and fresh bread, and they sat together watching the sun sink below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I have something I want to ask you," Nathan said when the last light had faded and the stars were blazing overhead. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Penelope Dawson, you came into my life like a whirlwind, turning everything upside down in the best possible way. You saved my son. You saved my ranch. You saved me from the grief that was consuming me. You are brave and brilliant and stubborn and everything I never knew I needed. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Penelope felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Nathan. Nothing would make me happier." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small diamond, and slipped it onto her finger. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "I hope you do not mind it being old." "I love it," Penelope said. "And I love you, Nathan Ramsey, with everything I am." They were married in September, in a ceremony at the small church in Sonora, with half the town in attendance. Tommy served as ring bearer, his left arm still splinted, but scheduled to be freed within the week. Penelope wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair, and Nathan wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Nathan kissed her, Penelope felt as though her heart might burst from happiness. This was what she had come west to find, though she had not known it at the time. Not just adventure or purpose, but love, the kind of deep, true love that made everything else worthwhile. They moved into the ranch house together, and Penelope set about making it truly a home. She hung curtains and planted flowers and filled the rooms with laughter and light. She continued teaching during the days, while Nathan worked the ranch, and in the evenings they were a family. The three of them gathered around the table, sharing stories of their day. Tommy's arm healed completely, leaving him with only a thin scar as a reminder of his fall. He took to calling Penelope Mama without any prompting, and Penelope's heart squeezed with love every time she heard it. She had not given birth to this child, but he was hers in every way that mattered, and she loved him as fiercely as any mother could. A year after their marriage, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. Nathan was overjoyed, and Tommy declared that he wanted a brother to play with, someone to teach all the things he had learned. When the baby arrived in the summer of 1879, it was indeed a boy, and they named him Samuel after Nathan's father. He had Penelope's green eyes and Nathan's dark hair, and from the moment she held him, Penelope understood the full depth of a parent's love. Tommy proved to be a wonderful older brother, doting on baby Samuel and helping Penelope with endless patience. The ranch prospered, and Nathan was able to buy more land and expand his herd. Penelope eventually gave up teaching to focus on raising their children, but she never stopped being an advocate for the community. She organized a library for Sonora, raising funds and collecting book donations from back east. She started a women's auxiliary that provided support for families in need. 2 years after Samuel's birth, their third child arrived, a daughter they named Rose. She had her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn spirit, and from the day she could walk, she was following her brothers around the ranch, insisting she could do anything they could do. Penelope watched her daughter with pride and amusement, seeing herself in the girl's fierce independence. The years passed in a blur of hard work and joy, of children growing and love deepening. Nathan and Penelope built something extraordinary together, not just a successful ranch, but a true partnership, a marriage of equals who supported and challenged and adored each other. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan surprised her with a trip to San Francisco, their first real time alone since the children had arrived. They walked along the waterfront and dined in fancy restaurants and made love in a hotel room with silk sheets, and it felt like being young again. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked one night as they lay in each other's arms. "Coming out here, giving up the life you could have had back east?" "Never," Penelope said without hesitation. "This is the life I was meant to have, Nathan. You and our children, this land, this community. I found my purpose here, found myself here. If I had stayed in Boston, I would have been half alive, going through the motions, but never really living. You gave me everything I did not know I wanted." "You gave me the same," Nathan said, pulling her closer. "I was lost before you came, Penelope. I was going through the motions, existing but not really living, just like you said. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I did not know I had said. You healed more than Tommy's injuries that day. You healed me, too. Healed my broken heart, and gave me a reason to look forward instead of always looking back." "We healed each other," Penelope murmured. "That is what love does, I think. It makes us whole." Tommy grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch work as Nathan got older. He eventually married the daughter of Frank Morrison, a sweet girl named Anna, and they built a house on the eastern portion of the Ramsey land. Samuel proved to have a mind for business and went off to San Francisco to study law, with plans to return and serve the community that had raised him. And Rose, fierce, brilliant Rose, shocked everyone by declaring her intention to become a doctor, and Penelope and Nathan supported her fully, even as others said it was inappropriate for a young woman. On a warm October evening in 1895, Penelope and Nathan sat on their porch watching the sunset, much as they had done on the night he proposed 18 years earlier. Their hair was grayer now, their bodies marked by age and hard work, but the love in their eyes was as strong as ever. "Do you remember the day we met?" Penelope asked, her hand in Nathan's. "When Tommy fell from the hayloft?" "Every detail," Nathan said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful, terrifying woman I had ever seen. You took charge like you had been born to it, and I knew right then that my life was about to change. I was so scared," Penelope admitted. "I had no idea if I was doing the right things for Tommy. I just knew I had to help, had to try. And then I looked up and saw you, and something just clicked. I knew you, Nathan. I knew you before we had even spoken." "Soulmates," Nathan said. "That is what we are, Penelope. I loved Sarah, and I always will. But what I have with you, it is different. Deeper, maybe, because we chose each other when we were both already grown, when we knew who we were. We built this life together from nothing, and look at what we made." Penelope looked out over the ranch, the house they had expanded over the years, the barns and corrals, the fields where their cattle grazed. She thought of their children and the grandchildren that would no doubt come, of the community they had helped make safer and stronger, of the love story that had begun with a boy's fall and a woman's determination to help. "We made something beautiful," she agreed. "We healed each other, Nathan. Your touch, your love, it healed more than my loneliness. It healed all the broken parts of me I did not even know existed. And I hope I did the same for you." "You did," Nathan said. "You absolutely did." He leaned over and kissed her, gentle and sweet, a kiss that held 18 years of love and partnership and understanding. "I love you, Penelope Ramsey. And I love you, Nathan Ramsey. Today and always." They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky, two people who had found each other against all odds in a harsh, beautiful land. The boy who had fallen had grown into a man. The woman who had come to help had found a home, and the love that had begun in crisis had grown into something eternal, something that would endure long after they were gone, passed down through their children and their children's children, a legacy of courage and compassion, and the transformative power of love. The Wild West had tested them, challenged them, forced them to be stronger and braver than they ever thought possible. But it had also given them each other, and in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything. As night fell completely and the coyotes began their distant song, Penelope rested her head on Nathan's shoulder and closed her eyes, content in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to be with. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life, and that, she thought, was the greatest adventure of all.